Okay, it's a brand new week. It's time for some food poisoning for thought. And this time it's actually going to be some serious food poisoning for thought because we're talking about religion. Now, I've been thinking an awful lot about the definition of religion and how perhaps redefining it a little bit may be really useful to us as a people and as a species. Now, most definitions of religion are incredibly vague, so vague that they allow us to say things like Star Trek is a religion. The best definition I found when I went digging on the internet actually came from AronRa, the so-called YouTube atheist, and president of, I believe, the Texas Association of Atheists. I probably got that wrong. He describes religion as a doctrine of ritual traditions, ceremonies, mythology, and associated dogma of a faith-based system which posits a posthumous promise that some element of the self, be it soul, consciousness, or memories, etc., may in some sense continue beyond the death of the physical being. That's not bad. It, in a way, reminds me of Stephen Jay Gould's comment of non-overlapping magisteria. And in that, Gould posits the idea that science and religion are two different areas of inquiry, facts versus value, so that there's no overlap in the things that they discuss. Now, most people disagree with them on this, and it's basically considered that after his health scare, he had a crisis of faith. But it's an interesting concept. And if you go from there to Karen Armstrong and her idea of mythos and logos, then we start getting interesting. In Mythos and Logos, Karen Armstrong goes with a similar idea to Gould's non-overlapping magisteria. She talks about the idea that there are two different ways of understanding the world. Now, I'm going to butcher this a little bit. That's the nature of this. But logos was logic. It's that both words come from the word story, or become the word story eventually. Logos is telling a story through logic, as it were. Mythos is telling a story through myth. So they're both ways of explaining the world. Now, moving on from there and getting to some other bits and pieces, if you will, I liked AronRa's definition of religion, although I felt that it was a little overly limiting. If we cut off about halfway through his definition, you get a very usable thing that's usable even theoretically to atheists. And let's go here. A doctrine of ritual tradition, ceremonies, mythologies. You can even go a little further. And associated dogma of a faith-based system. Stop. We can remove the posthumous promise. We can remove the idea that an element of the self survives. We can just throw that stuff away. Now, I've not gone point by point. It may be that there isn't a religion that doesn't suggest we live on after the death of the body, but that doesn't mean we can't create one. People create new religions all the time. So, a doctrine of ritual traditions, ceremonies, and mythologies, and associated dogma. Now we're getting somewhere. That's a useful piece. Now, I mean, dogma has a bad rap, but a quick look at the Wiktionary definition for dogma, then we have a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. Okay, it's not great, but let's go to dictionary.com and we get a belief, principle, or doctrine, or code of beliefs, principles, or doctrines. That's closer, all right. Now, obviously, something like this will be set down by an authority, but there will be scientific dogma for that matter. And part of the scientific dogma is that you don't accept authority, you challenge it. So I think we can still work with that. So let's go back to AronRa's definition again and modify it just a little further. A doctrine of ritual traditions, ceremonies, mythology, and associated dogma. Boom. What I'm looking at here is seeing what can the rest of the world use from the definition of religion without being religious itself? Can we get under the hood? Again, AronRa posited that you can define anything, including religion, by looking at the common elements shared by all of them, which is where he included his posthumous promise. But what if we were to remove the baggage? I mean, we look at cars, and if we were to look at all the cars, we would assume that a car has to have doors. We would assume that cars have to have a steering wheel. But you could easily design a car that ran with a different steering method than a steering wheel. It would not be hard to design a car that used a joystick. I mean, most driving sims on PC use joysticks. That would not be hard to do. It would be entirely possible to design a car that had no doors, just big scoop openings to step out of. I mean, these are easy examples. If you tear apart a car down to its bare frame, you've got the axle, you've got the engine, you've got the bits and pieces that make it run. You wouldn't call it a car on its own, but it's the skeleton of a car. That's what I'm looking for here. And it seems to me that if we can find that skeleton of religion, there might be something really useful we can do with it for our own lives and our own belief systems. What I'm suggesting, and I'll get more into this later in the week, what I'm suggesting is that we all need to build our own religion.